Hello everyone, Shalom lekulam, kef shebatem. You can't really speak because the microphones are muted, but we can see you and we're very happy that you're here. And welcome to this evening with Lieke van der Made, our guest artist at Artcube Artist Studios. She's gonna show us a project that she's been working on as a part of her research called The Thief on Display. And it's gonna be very interesting. It's mainly talks about archaeology and where it came from, its origins, and its display in museums worldwide. If you think in Israel, so all the artifacts that we have from our neighboring countries and all of our neighboring countries that have artifacts from Israel, or if you think of the British Museum, bigger collections in the world that have this kind of very sacred artifacts to the people that once owned them. So it's kind of to think about that. But I will let her explain in further detail. So Lieke, the stage is yours. And thank you.
Thank you.
Shalom lekulam. Toda rabba.
Thank you. So, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining. So yeah, what is already said a little bit. I started a research project, Thief on Display, this summer in Artcube Artist Studios, and about the display of looted artifacts in museums. I will share a little presentation for that. The research is for a large part about the display of artifacts that were looted in the West Bank and displayed in a museum in Jerusalem, as well as a collection of Moshe Dayan, also in a museum in Jerusalem. But before I get to that, I will share a little bit, a few works that basically led up to this research. Well, this image is of Moshe Dayan. It's one of the collages I made. I made now during the research. But I will go now to a little bit more personal story. It's a bit strange to only share to the screen, but a little bit crazy times anyway, so we'll go for it. I'll start with this little spoon. It's a little spoon that I inherited from my grandma a few years ago, and it reminds me of a story. My grandma moved when she was about my age. She moved to Curaçao, which is an island in the Caribbean, a former colony of the Netherlands. And she went by boat, so that's what reminds me of her. And they moved back to the Netherlands, so that's where I was born. But when I was 15, I went on holidays to Curaçao, and for me, I mean, it was a very nice holiday, like beautiful beaches, palm trees, everything. But it was also very strange for me to go to an island at the other side of the world, basically, where people speak Dutch. And kind of was the first time for me to really experience this colonial past of the Netherlands. really seeing the sites. I visited plantation houses. So it was, in a way, very shocking, actually. And looking back, I think about this many times as also a moment that that I've been in touch with objects, like visiting this plantation house that was turned into a museum, been in touch like on the ground where things happened, seeing objects that really carry a meaning, a memory with them, that tell a story about the past and also are connected to the identity of people. And well, what I also, going a little bit further, what I also very much liked as a child was going to archaeological museums. So this whole research is not coming from nowhere. And I really enjoyed seeing like the pottery, jewelry, and I was imagining how people were using this in the past. But you know, time went by and I thought about it more and more, and I also started to really think like not only where these objects come from, but also how did they got into these museums in the Netherlands or in Europe. And in relation to that, like, I mean, it wasn't, knowing now, often wasn't done quite legally. And it also made me think, like, doesn't objects change when you take it from their original surroundings and place it into a museum? And also, what does it mean for, you know, the local places or the local people from these places origin where these objects came from, to know that, for example, well, let's go to Babylonian Ishtar Gate that's in a museum in Berlin, or Nefertiti booth as well in Berlin, or Benin bronzes from Nigeria that are in the British Museum. And going a bit further, I also saw that this whole story gets into movies. For those who saw Black Panther, Objects from Wakanda, you can also find them. But the words, it was interesting for me to see this movie and yeah, can put it in the words of Eric Killmonger, who said in this fragment in the museum, "How do you think your ancestors got these?" Talking about the objects. "Do you think they paid a fair price, or did they take it like they took everything else?" Now this reminded me of something that happened a few weeks ago, I think, in the Netherlands. It's an activist group. The man that you see on this image is Wazula Diabanza from the activist group Bobiso Media. And what they did, they went to a museum in the Netherlands, Africa Museum, and they took this object that you see, originally from Congo. And they walked out of the museum, taking this object with them. And they say in this video, well, it's in French, but the translation is along the lines, the pieces that you can see here are stolen. Stolen in Africa during colonization, stolen in Africa during slavery. So I came today to take what is ours. And they walked outside with these objects, were arrested later. But in a statement about this event, also the director of the Africa Museum in the Netherlands acknowledges that there are many stolen objects in this museum. So as an introduction, events like this like colonial looting, repatriation requests of objects to return to their country of origin, and that combined with the destruction of artifacts is actually what led to a research that I did for my master's. I studied fine art and continued with the master artistic research. Now I applied for this master in 2016, moments before ISIS or Daesh smashed the gate of Al-Aqsa in Nineveh, Iraq. Before that, the Baghdad Museum got robbed, and also members of the same militant group blew up Palmyra in Syria. So what I did is I made drawings of these destructed sites, actually. This is one of the drawings that I made, which you can see now. And I related it, actually, the drawings that I made, they refer to a publication that was made by scholars that joined Napoleon Bonaparte in his campaigns, military campaigns in the Middle East, mainly Egypt. And in this publication, you can see etchings of scenes, landscapes, archaeology, architecture, history, and this publication was called La Description de l'Égypte, but I turned it into La Destruction du. Here you can see the original publication, which had images like this. So you can see that I kind of used the visual language, let's say, in my drawings. Now, how that happened was, how I got to that was mainly that it wasn't just these destructions of, for example, Palmyra, that triggered me to work on this subject. It was also things that I heard people say about these destructions, which were along the lines like, well, but luckily many objects from this area are in museums in Europe or in the States. That triggered something in me, because, well, can you say something like this knowing how these objects got into these museums in Europe? All taken in colonial times, often stolen, not done quite ethically, you could say. So yeah, that triggered me to work on this project for my master thesis, which was called From Napoleon to Daesh Through Art, Destruction and Reconstruction of Middle Eastern Artifacts. And well, all this led me into further research, which had to do with the balance between safeguarding heritage, by, for example, putting them in museums, storing them, warehouses for research, and taking artifacts from their original lands. A few other works that I made during...
There's a
yes.
question from Judith. She's saying, first of all, they're beautiful drawings, and she's asking if it's by hand or computerized.
By hand, fine liner. Yes.
By hand, Judith.
Yes. With this. All done with fine liner. So yeah, these drawings were the first thing I started on this project. Other works that I created are, for example, this. It's called Pattern with Crumbles of Whitewash Flaking from Her Displaced Soul. It's a Nefertiti bust, a replica, of course, the original one you could see before is in Berlin. But I place it in a sandblaster cabinet. And well, visitors could basically do with her whatever they wanted. So sandblasted, there was also a hammer and a file in there, and I was really curious what would happen if people would really use it. I wasn't so certain about that, but I think it took an hour for this to happen. So she was smashed completely. And what I did as well was making collages. You will see more about that. It's actually the start of digital collages that I made. My moving from drawing with pen to digital drawing. And I drew over artifacts that were destroyed mainly, or I placed drawings of artifacts back in their original location, you could say. And then what I also think is interesting within this whole archaeology and artifacts actually is the collection of them and the value of artifacts. That gets a little bit into this work. It's called Excavator, and I made it in 2018 together with Lieke. And what you can see there inside, I mean, it's an, what do you call this, claw machine, where usually you can take like teddy bears, unicorns, whatever out of it. But we put replicas of objects that were originally from the Middle East and now in museums in European states. Not necessarily looted, like the things I will talk about later, but objects that were moved. We don't know exactly the background of every single object. But in there was, for example, a little hippopotamus, Cyrus still in there, which you can see here. We also put Silog inscription in there. This Anderson cat, actually, I have one of them here. And it had a little note that says where it's coming from and where it is now and when it was excavated. This work is also a little bit a reference to souvenir, the gift shop, but what I think is fun about this object or about this work is that you can, if you manage to grab especially the plaster replicas and they fall into the dispenser, it can still break. So it's, again, talking a little bit about the destruction, but also about the value of an object. It's still valuable when it's broken. But enough, I think, about previous works. Which before that, I started working on digital collages, which I really enjoy. To draw with on an iPad or with a Wacom, I really enjoy to draw over photographs and such. So this Shattered is one of the drawings that I made.
What do you draw over usually? Like, what's the
photos.
image? But you feel something, what do you feel in the image that it takes you there to draw it?
I really enjoy just to draw over photographs, just to follow the lines, for example. And I like the combination of a work that I find on my computer in this research, because mainly it's I use I use images of found footage online. I mean, I collect these images and I really enjoy like, using them, playing with them, sketching over them. So yeah, that's how I get to this menu. And well, as I told before, yeah, the research that I did is for a large part about display of looted artifacts. And how I got to this specific cases is actually an article that I read, something like that, by Hakim Shah, actually in Hyperallergic, platform for art and culture. And the headline was demonstration at exhibition of stolen Palestinian archaeological artifacts. Then I found another article about the same thing that said, in Jerusalem, museum ethics go astray. This was talking about the exhibition Finds Gone Astray in the Bible Lands Museum in Jerusalem, which made me really wonder, you know, what's up with this specific exhibition? What's all the fuss about, basically? I mean, a museum in Jerusalem was displaying stolen artifacts, but in first instance, it seemed to be that it's not necessarily something new, as we could see before. But I mean, it caught my eye, and I got into it further. And I looked into the objects, made drawings of these objects that were on display on a computer by hand, some sketches. And well, the thing about this exhibition is that that apparently all the objects on display in this specific show were confiscated by looters in the West Bank, antiquity looters, and they were confiscated by the Israeli Archaeology Department of the Civil Administration, which is the archaeology department that is operating in Judea and Samaria, West Bank Area C, where they are responsible for enforcing the antiquity law of Israel, which one of the things of that means that antiquities are property of the state. What usually happens to these confiscated objects is that they end up in storage rooms in the West Bank. But for this exhibition, Finds Gone Astray, an exemption was made. So, well, to know more about this exhibition, I talked to the curator, one of the curators, he called Bloch, and he told me that actually the museum was approached by the chief officer of the civil administration of this archaeology department to create an exhibition in the museum, kind of to create bigger awareness, to take the objects out of the storage rooms, to show them in the museum, to let people enjoy them. And also a publication was made on this show with some more research. But since the objects were like, illegally dug up from the ground, there's not a lot of data available on provenance. It's not clear where they were found exactly, for example. So you could say that they have little archaeological value in that sense. But well, this publication was meant to put the object in a broader context. Well, it still doesn't say a lot about the protests. Well, what would be the problem with this exhibition? But the main thing that people were criticizing is that the objects were taken from the West Bank and exhibited in a museum in West Jerusalem, which would be in violation with the Oslo Accords or international law, which states that objects, archaeological objects or antiquities, cannot leave occupied territories. Next to that, it was that the objects were on display in a museum in West Jerusalem and not accessible or very accessible for Palestinians from the West Bank who cannot enter Israel and go to this museum. While most objects come from the West Bank. So some people say, well, the objects should belong there.
I think there's a bit of a disconnection. Let's see. Judith, maybe you want to ask a little bit of what you're saying now? We can open it up for, Ine. Lieke, you're back. Hi.
I'm back. Hello.
Good. So.
Needed a break, sorry. Or the internet needed a break, I'm not sure. Let me get back to the presentation. See, this is where we were, I guess. Yeah, so this exhibition, Finds Gonna Stray, it kind of stayed in my mind, and started questioning it, like what does it mean, this Oslo Accords and the violation of it, but also what should happen to these objects otherwise, like should they then just stay in the storage rooms, like collecting dust there. Now some people can see them, or should they return to their place of origin? Like should, for example, effort be done to put the objects in, let's say, Palestinian museum? Now this is kind of, for me, the next step in my research. So I'm still looking into this, but it's something that I would like to discuss later and go further into this. Well, you saw before I showed a few sketches that I made during residency. We cannot show see my studio now, so I'm sharing a few photographs. And drawings like this resulted, for example, in this collage, Carpet of Plunder, where I took the objects that were on display in this Finds Gonna Stray exhibition and placed them on this carpet. This is another collage drawing that I made. And what I did more is working on the video. It's still unfinished. We tried it earlier to show this video, but there's a chance that, as you could see before, my internet connection is not too stable. I guess I will share the video anyway, and it's 5 minutes, and if it doesn't work out, you can get a coffee in the meantime. So let's see. Yeah. If it really doesn't work, maybe you can tell in the chat, and I will show it after. See.
I've always been fascinated by ants. A little afraid for the red ones that will bite me in my butt. But intriguing nonetheless. Somehow seem to find every crumble of sugary food in your house, making trails in your garden, carrying many times their own weight. I must have gigs of footage of walking ants on my hard drive, and lately been fantasizing about our underworld. What do ants do under the rocks and sand we are walking or transporting over day by day? I believe they collect, smuggle, through the tunnels and chambers, treasures. Not only precious, tasty bugs and fruits, shards, shatter, splinters. Are they the soldiers? And when I thought about it more and more, I started to think that maybe, when being a military leader, Moshe Dayan was tracing entrails to find his treasures. Maybe he followed the little creatures to dig up ancient pots and pans and vessels, Venuses, masks, steels, coffins, and busts from the dirt. Maybe. I imagine the ants being the soldiers that were ordered by Dayan to dig up his antique treasures, unveiling what's under the rocks and sand. As a military leader, Moshe Dayan dug up tons of antique objects. What started as a hobby got a little out of hand. Involved with robbers, dealers, and smugglers, he unearthed the past and managed to destroy it, partially, simultaneously. After his death, the antique collection of Dayan was sold by his widow and bought by the Israel Museum in 1982. Criticized by some. Why was a million spent on stolen objects? On something that should belong to the state? What was it bought? Why was the collection not a gift to the museum? And actually, is the display of stolen ancient artifacts so exceptional? Don't we know it's not? 'Cause I learned about Nefertiti, about the Parthenon marbles, about the Rosetta Stone, about the seal of King Ramesses, the Mouse statue, Laocoon, St. Mark's horses, and the many, many tablets, masks, pots, coins, tools, beads, Venuses, pillars, temples, tiles, steels, bottles, knives, manuscripts, rocks, and sand. Stolen, looted from their lands. Better, because what remained would be destroyed later. Anyway, right? These days, most looting is being done by less famous antiquity thieves, exploring under the rocks and sand of the land between the ants, skills learned from foreign scholars, they say, doing their hard labor in their excavation campaigns, resulting illicit digging, professional looters. And then confiscated, checkpoints, borders, areas, zones, sea. I've been told that warehouses in the West Bank are stocked up with ancient artifacts, confiscated by the Israeli Archaeology Department of the Civil Administration from looters. Over 40,000 objects. Now what do you do with all these antiquities? Let them dust away or put them on display? The latter, apparently. And so opened the Finds Gone Astray show at the end of 2018 in the Bible Lands Museum in Jerusalem. Now, that's just a start, an introduction, a tip of an iceberg. And what about the ants? Should they hide their treasures deeper under the sand?
Well,
Bravo. Yeah,
that
claps
didn't,
all around.
I think, didn't exactly work out the way it's supposed to be. But I think I will put a link of the video online later or something like that if you would like to see it a little bit less bloody.
Yeah, if you want, you can send your name, or I don't know, you can email me your email, and we will share it with you in the next couple of days.
Exactly. But well, a guy that was, I guess you at least heard the audio, and the guy that I introduced in this video was Moshe Dayan. I really heard about him during my research here, and figured out that he was an Israeli military leader and politician from the 50s until 1974, if I'm correct. And next to that, Dayan had a hobby, and that was excavating and collecting antiquities. He dug up many of them himself, but also got involved with amateur and professional robbers and antiquity smugglers, dealers. And later on, I understood that he even used his military power for excavation campaigns. I read about it. Bas Kletter wrote a lot about it, about how he ordered soldiers to help with the excavation by providing protection. And a famous example was in Sinai, 1969, where he took inscribed steel, an obelisk, and some other objects. And well, they were taken by a military helicopter or plane and ended up in his private property with the military helping with protection mainly. I also started drawing objects in the Dayan collection, you can see here. Making collages. Now, well, what I just said, it's just one example of the antiquity by Dayan. Now, of course, you could say, well, that's the past, like that happened. Not so much we could do about that anymore now. But in this case, I'm very much interested in the current display of these objects. These objects were bought by the Israel Museum in the early 80s. So the objects of the private collection of Dayan were in the end bought after the death of Dayan. And this was something that was actually criticized by some, by archaeologists, for example. And I thought, actually, I talked about this with the current curator of the Israel Museum that knows a lot about this specific collection, Dayan Ari. And he told me that there are still archaeologists that are mad because this collection was bought. That money was spent on this collection that was for a large part stolen. Now, I understood that actually Dayan had promised before to give, after his death, the collection to the Israel Museum, but didn't catch his promise. And later on, his wife, after his widow, basically, sold the Dayan collection for $1 million to the Israel Museum. And the museum had tried to contact the authorities to confiscate this collection because it was stolen for a large part. Well, that didn't happen. So, and it is, well, then sad that they bought it because they wanted to keep the collection as a whole. They didn't want it to shatter around the world and the private collector, for example. But, well, I also acknowledge that some mistakes were made by the museum because in the end, not the whole collection did stay together as a whole. For example, some objects got lost in a way. And the museum didn't receive all the objects, and he's actually currently researching this. And within the current display, something that actually interests me a lot is how then these objects are displayed now. Because you could again say, this collection was bought in the 80s, they have it. What do you do with it? Like, not display it, put it away. But if you look at the collection now in the museum, you can, for example, not really understand the full story of the objects. Well, actually, when you enter the archaeology department in the Israel Museum, you can see huge coffins that are placed there, sarcophagus, and those are all part of the Dayan collection. The rest of the collection is in different parts of the museum, and they all just have a little note which basically say part of the Dayan collection. And in this, something that I'm interested in is, well, should it be made clear, the full background story, that actually these objects were robbed by Dayan, and that's one of the ways how they got and later were bought. That's how they got into the museum. So that's our thoughts that I have about this collection. Next to drawings, there are more sketches. I started making again digital collages. This is one of them. Another one where I again use pictures and draw over them. And we get back to the ants in this last collage that we'll share with you. And then I also think that I did enough talking for now. And I actually would like to discuss also a little bit with you guys. Now, we talked about it before, but I don't know the technicalities of this, but I would really enjoy it if you guys would be put into little duos or trios and discuss for a few minutes the following discussion point, which is something that I'm actually myself really questioning. And the large, the broader question of my research is, should looted artifacts be exhibited in museums? Now that is of course really broad. You could say it depends, when they were looted, where they were looted, in which museum, how. But in this case, mainly talking about, the two exhibitions that I talked about, the Finds Come Astray exhibition I talked about before, displaying confiscated artifacts from the West Bank, and the Moshe Dayan collection. And I would love to hear your thoughts about it. So let's make that happen.
So yeah, we're going to split into groups. The RNG is going to do that, so we'll be in a different room inside a break room for about 2-3 minutes, and then we'll go back to this session with everyone together. The mics will go on, and we can discuss and talk about everything. Thank you very much, Lieke. And we're doing it now. Let's see if it works.
אז מה השאלה? האם צריך
ברור שמצד אחד, כן, המוזיאון באיזשהו מקום של זה, והמוזיאון המערבי מצליח לעשות את זה טוב יותר, כן? כאילו במצרים, בקהיר, לראות שם את הקברים המאובקים ועם הזכוכיות השבורות זה קשה. כאילו, אז יש כל מיני עניינים כאלה, אתה יודע, אבל גם יש כאילו באמת את המקור של הדבר, האם זה צריך לחזור, ומה צריך לחזור, והאם יש את היכולות לשמר. אני חושב שיש כאילו דברים שהם כבר נחשבים נכסים היסטוריים, אולי, כן, ההיסטוריה הפכה אותם לנכסים כאלה, אבל זה לא בהכרח של מי שכתב כן, מי שייצר את התחשיב הזה. כאילו, זה מאוד מסובך, אבל אתה יודע, לא הייתי רוצה שאיזה מטבע זהב חשוב יעבור עכשיו למקור שלו ופשוט יאבד, ייעלם או משהו יקרה. כן, אבל אולי צריך לנסות.
אחד דילמה, כאילו, אני חושב על כל המוזיאונים המטורפים שיש בברלין, והעתיקות הבאמת יוצאות דופן שיש שם, האם צריך להחזיר את כל הבאמת צלים האלה של האלילים המצריים הקדומים למצרים? האם שם זה יישמר הכי טוב? האם זה אין לי תשובה בדיוק. מצד שני, באמת ברמה המוסרית, אתה אומר, זה נלקח משם, ולא בצדק כנראה גם, בהרבה מקרים לפחות. נשדד. אז מה התשובה הנכונה?
אין תשובה.
אין,
בוא נראה, סידרנו שזה יהיה 3 דקות. נראה אם זה באמת יעבוד, ופתאום נחזור באיזה פרק, כולם ביחד.
טכנולוגיה.
כן, לא, זה ממש, אתה יודע, גם כאילו יש הרבה קליימס פוליטיים לחלוטין, של אנשים שפעם היו בשטחים האלה, כן, בייחוד, אתה יודע, גם אלי שאל איזו שאלה כזאת בצ'אט, כאילו זה הכי, we used to live in the West Bank, כאילו, מה איתנו? האם זה לא שלנו? מה קורה? כאילו, יש הרבה דברים זרים. טוב, אני אחזור, ואני אראה מה קורה אם זה עובד, אני לא יודע אם שרדנו את הברייק-אפ הזה, בוא נראה.
מקווה לטוב.
We all returned, it's still working. Okay.
It was really, really short.
It was short?
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a very big question, so there's a lot to talk about. Was it short? Because I don't know, I had like 3 minutes. I think it was okay, but now everybody can unmute themselves, so feel free, join the conversation. If you have something to say, let's say that if someone starts talking, then we honor and respect and keep quiet until the next person. So,
Yes, perfect.
I'll share. I started I had a talk with Aviv, and it was, Aviv is here, and we decided there are not a lot of answers, like there are a lot of answers and what to do, because the museums on the one hand, they preserve the artifacts that are stolen. And, you know, I think sometimes in regarding to time, like the time, if it was stolen 200 or 300 years ago, sometimes it was like taking so long ago that the people in the museum, they don't feel that, you know, it's not us that did it. Sometimes maybe they can, like, you know, they can kind of ease their mind about it. But yeah, it was interesting to talk, like to see, and you know, Eli Bieber asked in chat, he said, well, you know, what about the West Bank? We used to live there. What about those artifacts? And as well, you know, I had a friend who went to the museum in Cairo, and he said all of the artifacts there, all of the exhibition cases and everything, they're all broken. It's dust everywhere. There are not a lot of guards. You can, you know, just take a mummy and run out the door, more or less. And, you know, what to do in this matter, because we wouldn't want to have like a very special gold coin, you know, returned to their original owners and be lost, or something will happen to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, whoever was alone in the room, we're very sorry. Maybe you should have joined together. But you can speak now, like you can unmute yourself and talk out the question that Lieke talked about.
I talked to myself.
Now you can talk to us.
Okay, so hi, I'm Inbal. I'm also a artist at the studios, but for my salary or earning for my bread, I work as a guide at the Israel Museum. And well, I'm a bit biased, but of course you have to show them because the museum is supposed to be for everyone. And I can say on the behalf of the Israel Museum that we are, the Israel Museum is not sponsored by the government. It's sponsored by private donators. And we're really trying to bring Palestinians to the museum. And we have now, we just like in the Corona, we opened Facebook in Arabic first time. And we have like Arab guides in Arabic. And we do lots of efforts to get, sometimes we have to get, from the army, a special, sorry, I'm getting stuck in English. Permits and passes to get, especially schools or children to come to visit to the Israel Museum. And it is an issue because sometimes they don't feel that that the Israel Museum is their museum. It's like, why is it called Israel Museum? So it's like a special situation where the Arab guides have to deal with. So I'm not really into that, but and it's also trying to say, like, maintain some kind of really diplomatic, and it's like not being political, but also being kind of between the drops, not to step on really touchy issues, but on the personal level, as a guide, well, I guide in Hebrew, of course, not in English, but as a guide, when I sometimes talk about the anthropoids, the coffins that are in the entrance of the archaeological, so I always say these were from Dir and Barach, that's Gaza today, and one day, it's off the record, but one day when we're going to have a peace agreement, then we'll hopefully return them. So it's like something really utopic, but I say it because just to get the idea inside someone's head. So that's okay. And I think things should be displayed, no matter what, because if you don't display them, then what value the things have value as if it's like now when the Corona, the museum was closed. So it's like, if the museum is closed, it's like, if a tree falls in the forest, no one hears it. So it's the same thing. It's like, the museum's closed. So, it doesn't, the museum is relevant because of the people that come and see it. Okay. Now I'm going to mute myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Anybody else wants to talk?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you thought, since you're asking about kind of decolonizing the past or something, and Israel is still in a colonial state, so it's not over. So why don't you look at museums that exist in the territories? Because the Israel Museum is quite a simple question that you could maybe compare to the Louvre or to, I don't know, other major museums, the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. It's the same thing, except that Israel is still a colonizer, but the Israeli state runs museums in the territories, and it runs archaeological sites in the territories, and it uses these sites not only to take artifacts, but also to capture land. So I think if you really want to, since you are doing a political artwork, like the sting is in the, obviously the Israel Museum, it's a bit, I think, easier, but the dangerous points, and also the points that will get more fire and that need more light, also in the artistic community, but also in the political community, are the places that are running and actually profiting and using the name of archaeology and having archaeologists work under them in order to do very political work. And these can be, you can find them. It's more dangerous. It's more, I feel it's, as an Israeli, I mean, there's been a lot of work of Israeli artists about these Israeli collections like Michal Bar-Or or Ruth Patir. They did some work on Moshe Dayan and on the archaeological, ministry. But actually they really use it in all kinds of ways today. So I was wondering if you thought to venture into that field, or you staying on safer ground?
No, it's a really good question. This is indeed the start of my research. Looking into these collections from objects that came, for example, from the West Bank and put into museums in Israel. My next step is indeed looking into, well, for example, museums in the Palestinian Museum in Birzeit. I haven't been able to go, unfortunately, yet.
In where? In Birzeit?
Yeah.
No, I didn't mean the Palestinian museums. I meant the Israeli institutions in the West Bank.
Yeah.
Birzeit is not Israeli, it's Palestinian.
No, it's Palestinian. Yeah. Okay, so the Israeli institutions. Yeah, I haven't looked into the institutions. I look more into, for now, into the way of, you could say, using the archaeology from the West Bank. I'm aware that a lot of that operations are even happening. A recent thing was that a baptism font was taken in really a military operation from a Palestinian village, and it was taken by the ADCA. In a military operation, the baptism font was there, and it was said, well, we return this font to to where it belongs, to us. It's like the narrative is made as returning objects, putting them in a biblical narrative. And so that are things that for example, that I started to look into. How is archaeology used, and archaeology taken from the West Bank, really. But it's a start. It's something that I definitely want to look into more.
I would, if I can recommend some sites that, like City of David is a very interesting site to look at. Mm-hmm. And there is an archaeologist NGO working around this. And you know that it's a big political thing. And
like Shava? Yeah.
But it's called Emek HaShaveh.
Yeah.
So what?
We will connect you both. And
no, yes. I don't want. I don't want. I'm not a representative of anything. I'm not
You have good
representing
ideas,
him.
I think, in the...
I'm just thinking that the Moshe Dayan is interesting, but it's like Moshe Dayan, he's the all-Israeli hero, and like, it's interesting, and he was a thief and everything, but okay, there are real things going on now. So City of David is one, and Susia is another one, but there are many other ones that you could find on your own, and there is actually work being done, but maybe not so much artistic work. So this is also interesting, because again, on Moshe Dayan and in general, the antiquities ministry, there's been some work. So of course, it's always interesting, a new perspective, and someone who's not from here to look at it, but they're really like hot subjects to look at that who knows what you will find, you know?
No, you're definitely right. And it is some subjects that I started to touch on, but I not know enough about, and I started my my start was to really keep it for now on the display of well, I'm really on museums.
Okay, well, good luck.
Thank you.
I wanted to add something. I think it's also very interesting how archaeology in Israel specifically is really a tool to convey the Israeli narrative. You can see, you know, I think that archaeology is in some way speculative. It's a lot of speculation. And in Israel, it's really used to convey the narrative of us being here before the Palestinians, and conveying the biblical narrative. And I think it's very present in all the museums in Israel that display archaeology. So I think it's also a very interesting point to look at.
מישהו רוצה לשתף? I can just agree on the... I can just agree what you said. Wait, Gilad, speak loud. Okay. רגע. Yeah, it's just, I think the most important archaeological artifact that we have in Israel, kind of in the Israel Museum, is Dead Sea Scrolls, which is just saying exactly this story of we've been here first, that have some proofs that we've been here first, and it's it's of course that all archaeology here is political, and you can find it also in I think everywhere. You can look at everything that you dig outside of the ground. It can be political, not just here. I think also in the States, if you're looking at some Native American places that you can find crazy stuff. It's not just here. Of course, archaeological is very political. I think that also connected to what's been said before. It's it's of course harder to talk about stuff that's happening right now because they're still very hot and very clashing, and it's hard to look at stuff, and also to you know. Are you biased? How biased are you when you're looking at archaeology? It's a big question, and it's hard to answer it. And when you're looking at something a bit maybe farther away, you can gather a bit more opinions and more data of different. And when you're looking at something that's happening right now, maybe it's very political and very hard to decipher. Is
is it really political? Is it political to the right way that you think it is? Maybe it's completely the opposite, and it's a bit tricky to decipher archaeology. I agree on this. That's all I want to add.
Just want to add that I think some of the most interesting things from the Dayan collection are actually the prehistorical things, or the pre-Bible time, because lots of religious people, or it also doesn't, there's like the Israeli interest, but it's like some kind of a limbo kind of field that's like because we're all grown on the biblical narrative, and suddenly there's like the masks that are, or especially the things that you draw, there are some that are really like they don't really set inside the narrative that we grow on here. So I think those things are they can like easily be in a Palestinian museum or whatever, because they don't sit in any agenda. They're like for humanity at the large scale. So,
I can object that sitting in an agenda. I mean,
yeah.
maybe for you,
no
you don't think it's sitting in an agenda, but I mean, they are sitting in an agenda for a lot of Israelis, like to see bones or fossils, archaeological fossils of dinosaurs, and it's sitting in a very dense point, and or just even dates. I went to a cave here next to in Jerusalem mountains, the Me'arat HaNetifim, how do you call it?
Stalactites.
Anyway, they just wrote, they just, so there is an estimated date, or how old this, and they just, it's scrubbed out because it's over the 5,000 years that the world was created in. So they just scrubbed it out, like really, you cannot read the date anymore. The date is not existed. So, I mean, it is also archaeological, prehistorical. It's also political here. It's also a very sensitive thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say there are a lot of narratives that people can add to a lot of different artifacts. It's the same as the way I think as people view art. Like we all have our kind of own perspective. It's not connected maybe to a political agenda, but it feels different to each and every one of us, I think, just to, I don't know, gaze at an artwork or see a stolen artifact. It's different. Hey, Eli, Ken.
Yeah, I guess hearing about how people kind of take the political narrative aspect of the artifacts. I just want to go back to my question because it seems like these artifacts are categorically different than, let's say, like traditional colonialist countries going to a land very far away and taking something, even if it is something that is politicized. It doesn't detract from the fact that we may have been here, we may have had something to do with these artifacts, regardless of the politicization of it. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, if at all, what is Israel's responsibility towards these artifacts that they may or may not have a connection to?
Sorry, what was the last thing you said?
I'm just wondering because obviously there's political narratives associated with with the artifacts, with their dates, with them in general. But if there is, if we were here historically at some point, what is our responsibility towards the artifacts? What regardless of the current political situation?
Well, I think for me, yeah, you can talk into terms of responsibility, but is it I also can question then, is it a responsibility of, something that happened, was created thousands of years ago? First of all, is that still, you could see, is that still in that sense a responsibility, and for Israel more than for Palestine, for example? And I think you can see this in many ways. Like it is different in a way, but objects, they are still taken. Taken from looters, taken from a thief, but put away from the original lands. And I think you can see, well, it's my responsibility. But I think these objects also have an archaeology, or have a value in the lands where they were taken from, in the West Bank.
Yeah, I guess that's the question, right?
Yeah.
Because like, in contrast to like, you talked about the place your grandma had grown up, and like for the Netherlands to go colonize that land and then take the art back to the Netherlands, it's incredibly out of context. But I think there's some nuance here that has to be made because of the specific historical context of Jews here, and even the current political situation with the West Bank. It's just not as simple. And if Jews did live in the West Bank, and we really don't have to get political here, but like, we could be scared about the what would happen to those artifacts under a Palestinian Authority, then are we at all responsible? I don't know. I see it a little bit different than like the traditional colonial narrative. There's a little bit more question here and nuance that I find myself with.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Anyone else that either questions or remarks?
Judith, I'll unmute you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a few things at the risk of having all my artists friends who are anti-colonialist hate me forever. We're living in an insane world in which we're told that Jews never had a connection here. We're living, I read hyperallergic, I'll just make a few statements. I read hyperallergic all the time. It's one-sided, and I could never even write a letter to the editor. There's nobody receiving any comments. It's common knowledge among, let's say, a friend of mine is a professor of ancient Near East. He told me it's common knowledge that the Bible Lands Museum was a private collection purchased unethically, and the only way the guy could make it kosher was to build a museum with his own money. Everybody knows that Dayan is the biggest thief in Israel, and it's an embarrassing thing. Nobody thinks that he did good things. It's just, I'm glad, I agree with Inbal that things should be displayed, but with labels saying where they came from. I mean, everybody's upset at what ISIS did. Understatement, understatement. Just, we're living in an insane location in insane times. And as Ellie said, things are not simple. They're not clear cut. We can't take the political reality of right now and apply it backwards, even to apply it to 50 years ago or 100 years ago, because it's not applicable. Okay. This used to be one giant area under the Romans, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Okay. Just people who should make art, people who do politics should do politics, and be careful. Now everybody can hate me. And
not at all. I think it's a very interesting point, what you said. And you know, it is.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Hi. Judith, I don't think that someone will hate you. Not at all because of your opinions, I hope so. But I disagree with the last sentence, the last words which you say, because artists are dealing with politics as well as they.
I know everything is political. The personal is political.
Everything is political, but you know, as you know my work pretty well. And you know that I am dealing with politics as well. And I am so happy that we can do it and we can make it, and that we are still have a bit of a freedom to say something with or through our art. So please don't take it from us. But I do agree that artists who are dealing with politics, they should go deeper and deeper to the research of the historical provements, because there is a kind of a feeling, let's say I do feel sometimes that especially young artists, they have an opinion, they believe in it, and they just take one side. They just don't consider the real history. They do research, they are making research, but it's not deep enough. They should go much and much deeper before they have a statement, a strong statement about what they do think. So I agree with you and I disagree, but I agree that we have to go on with doing art, considering politics, talking about
definitely, but we shouldn't forget history. I agree with you absolutely. We have to dig deeper, not just the past 20 years, and do art and do political and do personal political, but study the longer picture. Yes.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Thanks, Orit. Yeah.
So with that, we'll say Toda Rabba. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
It was very, very interesting, and yeah, we'll send the video via email. We'll send the link out. So either email me through whatever I sent in the beginning, and yeah, have a good night. Toda Rabba Shabbatim.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, Lieke.
Thank you.